What if the real reason your life feels stuck has nothing to do with bad luck, and everything to do with habits you don't even notice? Habits that hide in your routines, your thoughts, and your decisions, slowly shaping a future you never intended to build. Today, through the incredible story of Henry Royce, the man behind Rolls-Royce, we're going to uncover 6 silent habits that could be holding you back. He didn't start with money, education, or connections, but he built one of the most respected brands in the world by doing the exact opposite of what most people do every day. So listen closely, because the difference between mediocrity and mastery often comes down to the things we ignore. What if the biggest mistake you're making is waiting? Waiting until you feel ready, waiting until you have more money, waiting until someone gives you permission to begin. Most people think the right time will come like a signal from the sky. They say, someday I'll start, or when I have more time, I'll do it. But that day often never arrives, and the habit of waiting slowly steals their future. Henry Royce never had a perfect moment to start. His life was filled with the kind of struggles that would make most people give up. He was born in 1863 in a poor village called Alwalton, in England. His father ran a small flour mill, but the business failed early. There was no safety net, no support system, and no golden opportunity waiting around the corner. When Henry was only 9 years old, his father died, and with him, the last chance of a stable family income. Henry had to leave school at that young age, not because he wanted to, but because survival didn't give him a choice. He could have said, "I'll wait until I can study again." He could have said, "This is not the right time." But he didn't. He stepped into the world as it was, not as he wished it would be. He started selling newspapers. Then he delivered telegrams. He worked early mornings and late nights just to help his family survive. But what's more important is what he did with the few hours left in between. He taught himself. He didn't wait for a school to reopen its doors. He didn't wait for someone to give him a scholarship. He opened books himself. He read about mechanics, machines, electricity, anything he could get his hands on. Most people in his position might say, now is not the time to dream. But Royce quietly planted his dreams anyway. Every hour spent reading after a long shift. Every minute spent watching machines in action when others were eating or resting. Those moments built the foundation of something far greater. Years later, when he opened a small electrical company, it wasn't because someone handed him the perfect opportunity. It was because he had trained himself to start without it. He didn't have a business degree or a large loan. He had his experience, his discipline, and his refusal to wait. He knew the world wouldn't pause for him to feel ready. So he acted anyway. When he started building his first car, it wasn't in a modern factory with a team of engineers. It was in a small workshop with just a few tools and a determination that refused to break. He didn't know how people would react. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew he had waited long enough. And that decision to act when others might pause is what set him apart. You see, waiting becomes a silent habit. It feels responsible. It feels cautious. But it also delays every dream you have. It gives your fears more time to grow. It makes your energy softer and your vision blurrier. Henry Royce didn't wait to feel confident. He earned his confidence by doing. He earned it by failing, trying again, and refusing to let time steal his ambition. Most people aren't stopped by failure. They're stopped by hesitation, by the belief that they're missing something before they can begin. Henry started before he was ready because he knew he would never truly be ready. He knew that learning on the path was better than never walking it at all. If he had waited for more money, he never would have started his business. If he had waited for a better education, he never would have become one of the world's greatest engineers. If he had waited for someone to discover him, Rolls-Royce would never exist. He had every reason to wait, and yet he chose motion. That choice changed his life and eventually changed the world of engineering. There are moments in life when we tell ourselves, just a little longer, then I'll go. But time is not a promise, it's a window, and sometimes that window closes without a sound. There is a cost to waiting that you cannot see at first. Every idea you postpone loses energy. Every passion you delay loses clarity. And every opportunity you watch from a distance slowly becomes someone else's achievement. Royce knew that the only way to grow was to start, to begin before he had enough, to move forward while others paused. That mindset didn't come from a motivational speech. It came from survival, from hunger, from seeing that if he didn't take a step, no one else would take it for him. That's the truth many of us forget. Your future doesn't depend on what you want. It depends on what you're willing to begin. Every day you wait for the perfect moment is a day the wrong habits grow stronger. And just like that, waiting becomes normal. It becomes safe. And then one day you wake up and realize nothing has moved, not your career, not your skills, not your dreams. Henry Royce was never handed the right moment. He created it. He shaped it with calloused hands, tired eyes, and a mind that refused to give up. His entire legacy started because he didn't wait for better days. He began on the worst ones. And because of that, we remember him today not as the poor boy with bad luck, but as the brilliant man who built something timeless. So before you tell yourself it's not the right time, ask yourself this. Is the delay helping you prepare, or just protecting you from discomfort? Because the hard truth is, most of us don't need more time. We need more courage. And if a 9-year-old boy with no money, no education, and no connections could begin his journey without waiting, maybe you can too. Many people believe that if they didn't get a good education, their chances of success are already gone. They carry this thought with them like a quiet weight, using it to justify why they haven't gone further. They tell themselves, if only I had gone to college, or if I had the right degree, I'd be doing better by now. But what if that belief is more damaging than the lack of schooling itself? Henry Royce never had the luxury of finishing school. His formal education ended before he even reached his teenage years. After his father died, Royce had to work just to survive. But what makes his story powerful isn't that he succeeded despite this. It's how he redefined what learning actually meant. He didn't confuse school with education. He understood that while school could end, learning never had to. Royce was a student of the world. He read books late into the night, asked questions no one else bothered to ask, and learned from everything around him. He studied machines not in a classroom but in real workshops, where sweat and skill were worth more than paper diplomas. He didn't pass tests, he passed challenges. When something broke, he figured out how to fix it. When he didn't know how something worked, he took it apart and studied every piece. That curiosity, that hunger to understand, became his real education. It wasn't structured or scheduled, but it was powerful. He built his learning from life itself. And through that, he gained something far more valuable than any degree. He gained mastery. So many people today wait to be told they are ready. They look for a title, a certificate, or someone to validate their knowledge. Royce never waited for that. He learned because he needed to and because he wanted to. He didn't ask if it counted. He made it count. When he founded his own electrical business, there were no credentials hanging on the wall. There was only the work, the engines, the motors, the machines, and they spoke louder than any certificate ever could. His clients didn't care where he studied. They cared that what he built worked better than anything else. That's the truth most people overlook. In the real world, ability eventually speaks louder than your background. People may admire your diploma, but they trust your results. Royce earned that trust not with a school record, but with performance. His hands became his professors. His tools became his textbooks. Every mistake was a lesson. Every repair was a quiz. And in time, he didn't just catch up with those who had formal education. He outpaced them. He outworked them, outlearned them, and outlasted them, because he never stopped. He understood that education is not a place you go. It's a path you walk every day. This mindset is what separated Royce from the crowd. Not privilege, not permission, but persistence. And the belief that he could teach himself anything he was willing to study deeply enough. If you believe your lack of education is holding you back, ask yourself this. Are you still trying to learn, or have you stopped just because a school bell no longer rings? Because the most dangerous habit isn't ignorance, it's thinking you can't grow past it. Royce proved that you can. He didn't wear a graduation cap, but he became a teacher to others. He didn't sit in rows of desks, but the world became his classroom. His notebooks were his engines. His exams were his customers' satisfaction. And every day he studied something new, his confidence grew. Every day he applied what he learned, his skills became sharper. Education was not something he missed. It was something he built. So don't let a missing degree silence your voice. Don't let the absence of school keep you from the presence of growth. If a boy who left school at 9 could teach himself to build machines that changed the world, what's stopping you from learning the next thing you need to know? The real question isn't what school you went to. The question is, are you still a student now? Because if you are, there is no limit to what you can become. There's a habit that quietly destroys potential without ever making noise. It's the habit of doing just enough to get by. It whispers, "This is fine," or "No one will notice," every time you cut a corner or leave a detail unfinished. Henry Royce lived by the opposite mindset. He believed that anything worth doing was worth doing with complete attention. He didn't just work hard, he worked with precision, and that made all the difference. In the early days of his electrical business, Royce wasn't making luxury cars. He was building small devices, dynamos, motors, and cranes. These were everyday tools used in industries that most people never thought about. But to Royce, every machine mattered. He treated each piece of equipment as if it were going to be judged by history. If it failed, he studied why. If it succeeded, he asked how it could be made even better. That mindset built his reputation. People noticed his products lasted longer, worked smoother, and rarely broke down. Not because he had better materials, but because he had better standards. Royce didn't settle for good enough. If a machine left his workshop with a flaw, he would take it apart and fix it himself. Even if no one else noticed the problem, he did. Even if the client never complained, Royce couldn't sleep knowing something wasn't right. That obsession with quality became the foundation of everything he created. It turned his small shop into a brand. It wasn't marketing. It wasn't luck. It was excellence, quiet, consistent, and relentless. In 1904, when he built his first car, that same principle followed him. The car wasn't flashy, but it was smooth. It didn't shake and rattle like other early automobiles. It glided, the engine purred. It wasn't just transportation, it was a statement. A statement that someone had cared enough to do the job right. That car caught the attention of Charles Rolls, and the rest is history. But none of that would have happened if Royce had settled for average. Today, most people are taught to finish quickly, check the box, and move on. But Royce teaches us something different. He teaches us that how you do the small things determines the big things. If you rush the details, you lose the trust. If you ignore the flaws, you block your growth. The people who rise are the ones who treat even unseen work like it matters. Because it does, it always does. Royce's success wasn't a secret, it was a habit. A habit of never being satisfied with just enough. He stayed late, reworked designs, and questioned everything. He asked, "Can this be better?" And often the answer was yes. Not because something was broken, but because he believed excellence had no finish line. He didn't need praise, he needed to know he gave his best. His employees learned to respect that. His customers learned to expect that, and the world eventually came to demand that. Rolls-Royce became the gold standard. Not just because of one man's skill, but because of his refusal to do anything halfway. That's the habit that changes lives. Not talent, not speed, but care. Commitment to doing it right even when no one is watching. So ask yourself, are you doing just enough to move forward, or are you doing enough to stand out? Because what you accept from yourself silently shapes your future. Royce didn't need a crowd to impress. He needed one machine to work flawlessly. And because he focused that deeply, the world paid attention. You don't have to be the loudest. You don't have to be the fastest. But if you're willing to care more than most people care, about your work, your craft, your effort, you will stand above the rest. Not immediately, but inevitably. Because the world still notices when something is built with love. Just like they noticed a quiet engineer from Manchester who refused to deliver average. There's a kind of failure that doesn't look like failure at first. It looks like safety, like caution, like being realistic. It's the failure that comes from avoiding risk. People often say, "I'm just being careful," when what they really mean is, "I'm scared to try." But the cost of never risking anything is that you risk everything, your growth, your progress, your future. Henry Royce understood that. He didn't have a safety net when he started. There was no backup plan, no investor promising to catch him if he failed. When he opened his first electrical business in 1884, it was a risk. He had saved some money from years of hard work, and he used it not for comfort but to build something uncertain. He didn't know if the business would succeed. He didn't know if customers would come, but he did it anyway. Because he knew the bigger danger was staying where he was. Playing it safe might have given him a small life, but he wasn't after small. He was after something meaningful. And to build something meaningful, you have to be willing to lose. Royce risked money, time, and reputation. He risked comfort. He left behind the familiar to chase something that only existed in his mind. And every time he took a risk, he learned more. When he began building his first car, the risk was even greater. He was stepping into a world already dominated by French and German manufacturers. He had no name in the automotive world, no large factory, and no famous backers. Just an idea, a few tools, and the courage to begin. He could have told himself, "It's too late to enter the car industry." But he didn't, because he wasn't waiting for the perfect opening, he was creating one. He didn't look at giants and walk away. He looked at giants and said, "I'll build something better." That mindset changed everything. Most people only take steps that feel safe. They avoid discomfort, but Royce embraced it. Not because he enjoyed fear, but because he knew growth lived on the other side of it. Playing it safe keeps you in the same place. Royce didn't want to stay in the same place. He wanted to build something that had never existed before. And you can't build the future while clinging to the past. The Rolls-Royce brand was born not just from skill, but from boldness. It was born because a man dared to do something new, because he trusted his vision more than he feared failure. Even the partnership with Charles Rolls was a risk. Two men from different worlds, one a wealthy aristocrat, the other a self-made engineer, but they trusted each other's strengths. They took a chance. And that chance led to one of the most iconic names in automotive history. Not because everything was guaranteed, but because they believed the reward was worth the risk. Royce never gambled recklessly, but he always bet on his ability to improve. He believed that he could figure things out along the way. He didn't need certainty, he needed purpose, and he followed it. Most people never find out how far they could go because they never allow themselves to start the climb. They wait for guarantees, for signs, for someone to go first. Royce went first, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. So ask yourself, what are you avoiding, not because it's wrong, but because it's risky? And what could your life look like if you stopped avoiding it? The best things in life often live behind fear. Royce didn't run from that truth, he ran toward it, and the world followed. There's a habit that looks innocent but slowly corrodes your greatness. It's the habit of chasing recognition before mastery. It's easy to fall into. You do something good and you want someone to notice. You post, you wait, you check who's looking. And when no one responds the way you hoped, you feel discouraged. But Henry Royce wasn't interested in applause. He was interested in improvement. He wasn't trying to impress the world. He was trying to perfect a craft. While Charles Rolls attended public events, gave speeches, and gained social attention, Royce stayed in the shadows, focused on the machines. He didn't envy the spotlight. He respected the work. He knew that fame without substance fades quickly, but mastery lasts. In fact, one of the reasons the partnership between Rolls and Royce worked so well is because they weren't chasing the same thing. Rolls brought charisma and public trust. Royce brought depth and relentless dedication. He didn't want to be known. He wanted his machines to be known. He didn't want compliments. He wanted reliability, silence, smoothness, qualities that couldn't be faked. That's why when you see a Rolls-Royce glide across the road, you're not watching ego, you're watching discipline. And that kind of excellence doesn't come from chasing applause. It comes from falling in love with the process. Royce spent hours redesigning parts most customers would never see. He obsessed over bolts and bearings and measurements. He didn't ask, "Will this impress people?" He asked, "Will this perform flawlessly?" He didn't need his name on every advertisement. He needed his signature in every screw. And that's why Rolls-Royce became more than a product. It became a promise. A promise that what you bought was built by someone who cared more about quality than credit. In today's world, we've reversed that. We want credit before effort. We want recognition without repetition. But Royce reminds us that it's mastery that earns respect, not popularity. He became one of the most respected engineers in the world, not because he was loud, but because he was precise. He stayed out of the headlines and inside the workshop. His success didn't depend on visibility. It depended on value, the kind that can only be created in silence. So many people today give up on something too early because it's not getting enough attention. But attention is shallow. Mastery is deep. And the deeper you go, the more valuable you become. Royce didn't wait to be celebrated. He waited until the machine was ready. He wasn't working for applause, he was working for excellence, and that made all the difference. So ask yourself, are you more focused on being seen or becoming skilled? Because one of those leads to confidence and the other to emptiness. Royce didn't chase the crowd, but eventually the crowd came to him, not because he asked for it, but because his work demanded it. That's what happens when you stop measuring success in likes and start measuring it in legacy. There's a habit that hides in plain sight, often overlooked because it feels so small. It's the habit of ignoring details. It doesn't feel dangerous in the moment. You skip a step, you leave something slightly off, you say, it's good enough. But over time, those tiny slips become the reason things fall apart. Henry Royce never allowed that. In fact, he believed that greatness lived in the details most people ignored. He once said, "Strive for perfection in everything you do." And he meant it. For Royce, perfection wasn't a dream, it was a discipline. When he built his machines, he examined every single part. Not just the big pieces, but the tiny ones, the ones buried inside where no customer would ever look. Because he knew something most people forget. If you ignore the small things, they eventually become big problems. Royce made sure every nut and bolt was measured to perfection. Every gear was tested for smoothness. If there was a flaw, no matter how hidden, he fixed it. Not because anyone would complain, but because he would know. And he refused to put his name on anything less than excellent. That mindset turned his workshop into a standard. A place where workers knew nothing leaves unless it's right. Not almost right, not close enough, but right. Royce trained his team to see what others didn't. He made them slow down and look again, and again, until the product they delivered could not be improved. This level of care is rare, because most people are in a rush. They're rushing to finish, to move on, to launch, to post. Royce didn't rush. He refined, he revised, he reviewed. And that's what made his work timeless. Not fast, but flawless. His cars were not the loudest. They weren't the flashiest. But they were the most respected. Because people knew when they bought a Rolls-Royce, they were buying invisible quality. Quality in the details, the weight of the door, the quiet hum of the engine, the smoothness of the ride. It all came from the parts no one else saw. And that's what most people miss. They focus on what people will notice first, not what will matter most. But Royce built from the inside out. Because he knew integrity begins where no one is watching. That's true not just for machines, but for people. When you ignore the details in your work, your relationships, your character, those cracks will grow. And eventually, things you built will fall. But when you honor the details, everything you build becomes stronger, more stable, more lasting. Royce's legacy wasn't built in one big moment. It was built in thousands of small ones. Moments where he could have said, "That's fine," but didn't. Moments where he stayed longer, looked closer, and did better. Because he believed that even the invisible things matter. Especially the invisible things. So ask yourself, what are you leaving undone because it seems too small to fix? What are you rushing past because you think no one will notice? Because someone always notices, and more importantly, you do. You know when something could have been better, and that knowledge lives in you. It either lifts you with pride or weighs you down with regret. Royce chose pride. Not arrogance, but quiet, earned confidence. Because he knew he had done everything he could. And when the world saw his work, they didn't just see metal and wheels. They saw care. They saw standards. They saw the result of someone who didn't ignore the little things. And in a world full of shortcuts, that made all the difference. Every one of these 6 habits has a quiet way of taking more from your life than you realize. They don't ruin you overnight, but they will shape the version of you that shows up tomorrow. Henry Royce didn't live loudly. He didn't chase fame. But he built something permanent because he committed to the habits that most people avoid. Starting without waiting, learning without a school, working beyond expectations, risking wisely, mastering without recognition, and caring about the smallest details. If his story has reminded you of what you've let slip, or what you still have time to change, then that's where your own path begins. Which of these habits are you ready to break? And more importantly, which new ones are you ready to build? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that teach, inspire, and help you grow.